The sound of a door opening was not a sound at all. It was a change in the air pressure, a whisper of displaced dust motes, a shift in the light that fell across the worn linoleum floor of the Northwood Community Center. For the other children in the toddler room, it meant nothing. A new kid arriving, a parent leaving, Ms. Anya returning with juice boxes. For 3-year-old Stellan Kovac, it was a silent, full-body command. He didn't cry. He didn't gasp. He simply ceased to be. One moment he was a small, blonde-haired boy stacking worn wooden blocks into a wobbly tower, his brow furrowed in concentration. The next, the front door to the center clicked open, and he was gone. Not gone from the room, but gone from sight. He moved with a practiced, liquid silence that was unnerving in a child so young. He folded his small body, a piece of human origami, into the knee-hole of Ms. Anya's metal desk. His head tucked, his arms wrapped around his shins, he made himself impossibly small. He had been doing this for the 5 months he'd been at the center, since he and his mother, Petra, moved into the subsidized apartment complex 2 blocks away. Ms. Anya, a woman with kind eyes and 24 years of experience with children, had learned the routine. She would finish greeting the new arrival, her voice calm and steady, and then she would begin the quiet search. It never took long. Under the desk, behind the plush caterpillar, inside the empty toy bin. Stellan was always there, a tight knot of silent terror, waiting for the sound of the door closing and the loud noises that always followed. Except here, the loud noises never came. It was a fact his body had not yet learned to trust. He was 3 years and 2 months old. He knew how to make himself invisible. It was the first and most important lesson he had ever learned. The world was a place of open doors and the loud, angry sounds that came through them. Hiding was not a game. It was survival. From a chair in the corner, a man watched. He didn't work at the center, not officially. He was a volunteer, a presence as solid and quiet as the brick walls. Ezekiel Toussaint, known to most as Zeke, was 62 years old. His hands, resting on his knees, were large and mapped with the faint, pale lines of old scars, souvenirs from 30 years spent as a firefighter for the city. He'd retired 2 years ago, but the instinct to watch, to assess, to look for the fire before it started, had never left him. He was a big man, broad in the shoulder and deep in the chest, his presence made larger by the black leather vest he always wore. On the back was the emblem of his motorcycle club, a stylized iron phoenix rising from flames, circled by the words, Iron Covenant MC. He'd been riding with the Covenant for 22 years. They weren't saints, but they were a brotherhood, and part of their charter was community service. They fixed roofs for the elderly, ran toy drives at Christmas, and provided quiet, watchful security for neighborhood events. Zeke's post was here, at the community center, 3 afternoons a week. He just sat, a mountain of calm, his presence a silent deterrent to the trouble that sometimes bled over from the surrounding blocks. Most of the time, he read paperbacks or simply watched the kids play, a faint, sad smile on his face. But for the past few weeks, he had been watching Stellan. He saw what others missed. He saw that the boy's silence wasn't shyness. It was a shield. He saw that the vanishing act wasn't a quirk. It was a trauma response, as clear and sharp as a burn mark. Zeke recognized it because he had seen it before, seared into his memory from a call 17 years, 4 months, and 6 days ago. A 3 a.m. dispatch to a domestic dispute, a fire alarm pulled in desperation. They'd forced the door. The apartment was chaos, broken glass, overturned furniture. A man, wild-eyed and bleeding from a gash on his forehead, was screaming at a woman huddled in the corner. And between them, held up like a sandbag, was a little girl. 3 years old, maybe 4. She wasn't crying. Her eyes were wide and vacant, her body limp in her father's grasp. She was just there, a shield made of flesh and bone. They had gotten the man, tended to the woman. Zeke had been the one to lift the little girl away. She felt weightless, hollowed out. He carried her to the ambulance, and she never made a sound. She just stared at the flashing lights, her expression unchanging. He never learned her name. He never saw her again. But her eyes, ancient and empty in a child's face, were printed on the back of his eyelids forever. Stellan had those same eyes. Zeke saw the way the boy's mother, Petra, dropped him off. She was young, maybe 25, with the perpetually exhausted look of someone working 2 low-wage jobs. Her smile was brittle, her movements hurried. She would kneel, kiss Stellan's hair, and whisper something in a language Zeke didn't recognize. Slavic, maybe. Her hand would tremble as she straightened his collar. And some days, like today, she wore her makeup a little thicker on her left cheek, a clumsy attempt to hide the faint, yellowish bloom of a fading bruise. Zeke saw it all. The boy who hid from the sound of a door. The mother who hid her bruises under cheap foundation. He knew this story. He had walked through the wreckage of it 100 times in his career. A door opens, the yelling starts, and a child learns to disappear. He sat in his chair, the worn leather of his vest creaking softly, and he made a decision. He wouldn't call social services, not yet. That was a blunt instrument, and sometimes it shattered more than it fixed. He wouldn't confront the mother. Shame was a high wall to climb. He would do what he had learned to do best over 30 years of walking into chaos. He would be patient, he would be present, and he would start with the boy. The next day, Zeke didn't bring a book. He brought a small red plastic toolbox, the kind sold in the toy aisle. It was filled with oversized, brightly colored plastic nuts and bolts and a chunky, indestructible wrench. He didn't go near Stellan. He found a spot on the floor about 15 feet away, a clear patch of linoleum between the reading corner and the block area. He sat down, crossing his long legs, a slow and deliberate process. He opened the toolbox with a soft click. He didn't look at Stellan. He didn't speak to him. He simply took out a large yellow bolt and a red nut and began to slowly, methodically, thread them together. His large, scarred hands made the toy look impossibly small. He worked with a quiet focus, as if solving the world's most complex puzzle. He screwed the nut on. He screwed it off. He picked up a blue one. From under Ms. Anya's desk, 2 small blue eyes watched him. Stellan had vanished the moment Zeke had walked in, the soft thud of his boots on the floor as silent a trigger as the click of a door. But from his hiding place, he saw the big man. He saw the red toolbox. He saw the bright yellow bolt. He stayed hidden, but he watched. For 45 minutes, Zeke sat there, assembling and disassembling the plastic parts. He built a small, nonsensical sculpture. When Ms. Anya announced it was time for snacks, Zeke carefully put all the pieces back in the toolbox, except for one. He left a single, bright green bolt on the floor where he had been sitting. Then he stood up, gave Ms. Anya a small nod, and left. The door clicked shut behind him. Minutes passed. The other children scrambled for their juice and crackers. When the room was loud with happy chatter, Stellan crept out from under the desk. He moved on his hands and knees, low to the ground. He crawled to the spot where Zeke had been. He looked at the green bolt. He didn't touch it. He just looked. Then he crawled back to his hiding spot. Hit subscribe if you believe every child deserves to feel safe when a door opens. Comment the name of your city and share this with someone who needs to know that sometimes the quietest presence makes the loudest difference. 2 days later, Zeke was back. Same chair, then same spot on the floor, same red toolbox. This time, he noticed the green bolt was gone. A flicker of something warm moved through his chest. He opened his toolbox and began to build again. This time he hummed, a low, rumbling tune with no discernible melody. It was the sound of a big engine idling. Stellan hid, as always. But this time, he wasn't under the desk. He was behind the big plush caterpillar, a slightly less fortified position. He could see Zeke more clearly. He could hear the low hum. It wasn't a scary sound. It was steady. It was calm. He watched Zeke work for the full 45 minutes. When it was time to go, Zeke packed up his tools, leaving a red nut on the floor this time, a few feet closer to the caterpillar than where the bolt had been. This became their ritual. Every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday afternoon, Zeke would arrive, sit on the floor, and work with his tools. He never tried to get closer. He never spoke to Stellan. He just existed in the space, a predictable, non-threatening presence. Each time he left, he'd leave a piece behind, a breadcrumb on the trail to trust. Stellan, in turn, began to change his behavior in increments so small only a man trained to watch for the telltale signs of smoke could see them. He started hiding behind the bookshelf instead of under the desk. Then he'd peek one eye around the edge. He began collecting the pieces Zeke left. He kept them in a small, loose pocket sewn into the lining of his coat, a secret treasure trove of plastic nuts and bolts. They felt smooth and solid in his hand. After 3 weeks, a breakthrough. Zeke was sitting on the floor, humming, trying to attach a long blue piece to a yellow wheel. He was pretending to struggle, his big fingers fumbling with the connection. A tiny voice, thin as a spider's thread, came from behind the bookshelf. Upside down. Zeke froze. He didn't turn his head. He didn't acknowledge the voice directly. He just looked at the pieces in his hand. He slowly rotated the blue piece. "Oh," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Like this?" He clicked it into place. "Thank you." He didn't say another word. He just kept building. 10 minutes later, a small body crawled out from behind the bookshelf. Stellan didn't come close. He just sat, about 10 feet away, his knees tucked under his chin, watching. He was no longer hiding. He was observing. For Zeke, it felt like watching a fawn step out of the forest into a clearing for the first time. One wrong move, and it would be gone. He finished his session. He packed his tools. He left a yellow wrench on the floor, in the middle of the space between them. A bridge. The next time Zeke came, Stellan didn't hide. He sat by the bookshelf, waiting. When Zeke sat in his usual spot, Stellan crawled over to the yellow wrench, picked it up, and crawled back. He held it in his lap. For the first time, Zeke allowed himself to look directly at the boy. Stellan met his gaze for a fraction of a second before looking down at the wrench in his hands. Zeke gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod. He opened his toolbox. "Want to help?" he asked, his voice soft. Stellan looked up. He clutched the wrench. He gave a tiny, hesitant nod. "Okay," Zeke said. "I'm building a fire truck. Every fire truck needs good wheels. That's the most important part. You're in charge of the wheels." He rolled a black plastic tire and a red hub across the floor. They stopped right at Stellan's knees. The boy looked at the pieces, then at Zeke. He looked at the wrench in his hand. For a full minute, he did nothing. Zeke waited. He didn't push. He didn't prompt. He just waited. The silence was a conversation. It said, "You are safe. You are in control. I will not rush you." Finally, Stellan put down the wrench. He picked up the tire and the hub. His small fingers, clumsy and unsure, tried to push them together. He was trying to put them in backward. Zeke didn't correct him. He just watched. He let the boy fail. He let him discover the solution on his own. After a moment of frustration, Stellan stopped, looked at the pieces, and flipped the hub over. It slid into place with a satisfying click. He looked up at Zeke, his eyes wide. He didn't smile, but the emptiness was gone. In its place was a flicker of pride. "Good job," Zeke said, his voice full of a warmth that surprised him. "That's a good, strong wheel." It was the beginning. If you're enjoying this story, hit that hype button right now. It's free, takes a second, and helps this video reach more people who need to see it. Now back to the story. Over the next 2 months, their ritual evolved. Stellan no longer hid. He would wait for Zeke, and they would sit on the floor, the red toolbox between them, and build. They built fire trucks, police cars, houses, and tall, wobbly towers. Zeke let Stellan lead. If Stellan wanted to build a car with 6 wheels and no doors, that's what they built. It was during one of these sessions that the truth came out, as it always does. Not in a flood of tears or a dramatic confession, but in a quiet, matter-of-fact statement that was more devastating than any scream. They were building a house, a simple square structure of blue and green blocks. Zeke picked up a small white piece shaped like a door, complete with a tiny molded doorknob. He moved to fit it into an opening they had left. Stellan's small hand shot out and covered the opening. "No," he said. His voice was still quiet, but it was firm. "No door." Zeke paused, his hand hovering. He looked at the boy's serious face. "Okay," he said, putting the door piece down. "No door. Why not?" He asked it gently, a question born of curiosity, not interrogation. "Doors are for yelling," Stellan said, his eyes fixed on the blockhouse. "The yelling comes through the door." Zeke's heart felt like a lead weight in his chest. The memory of the call from 17 years ago flooded back, the sound of splintering wood as they forced the entry, the screaming inside. He took a slow, steadying breath. He had to get this right. He looked at the small, serious boy beside him. He didn't offer a platitude. He didn't say, "No, they're not." He didn't try to fix it. He validated it. "Sometimes they are," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Sometimes people are loud and angry, and the sound comes right through the door. That's a hard thing. It's scary." Stellan looked up at him, his blue eyes searching Zeke's dark ones. He seemed surprised by the response. He was used to adults telling him not to be scared, that everything was fine. He wasn't used to being understood. "He put his hand on my face," Stellan said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "He held me." The door opened. The yelling was loud. Zeke felt a cold fury rise in him, but he banked it, pushed it down deep. The boy didn't need his anger. He needed his calm. He was talking about being used as a shield, the ultimate betrayal. "That's not your fault," Zeke said, his voice thick with emotion he fought to control. He looked Stellan directly in the eye. "It was not your fault. It was never your fault. You were just a little boy. You are just a little boy. It's a grown-up's job to keep you safe. Their job, not yours." Tears welled in Stellan's eyes, the first tears Zeke had ever seen him shed. They traced clean paths through the faint grime on his cheeks. He didn't sob. He just let them fall. Zeke didn't move to hug him. It was too soon for that. A hug could feel like a trap. Instead, he just sat there, a solid, unmovable mountain of a man, bearing witness to the boy's pain. He put the white doorpiece back in the toolbox and closed the lid. "No doors," he said softly. "Our house doesn't need one." That afternoon, when Petra Kovac came to pick up her son, Zeke was waiting near the entrance. He had never spoken to her beyond a polite nod. She approached, her eyes darting around nervously, her hand already reaching for Stellan. "Ms. Kovac," Zeke said, his voice gentle. "Can I have a word?" She flinched, a barely perceptible tightening of her shoulders. She looked like a cornered animal, expecting a blow. "I volunteer here," Zeke explained, keeping his hands visible and his posture relaxed. "I'm a friend of Stellan's." Her eyes widened in surprise. "Stellan has a friend?" "He's a great kid," Zeke said. "A smart builder. He helps me with my tools." He looked at Stellan, who was hiding behind Petra's legs, clutching her jeans. Then he looked back at Petra, his gaze soft but direct. He saw the faint purple shadow under her eye, newer than the last one. "My name is Zeke," he said. "I'm with the Iron Covenant. We help out in the neighborhood. We have friends, lawyers, people who can help with housing, people who can help with loud noises." He let the words hang in the air. He wasn't accusing, he was offering. He pulled a small plain white card from his vest pocket. It had a single phone number on it. "This is for a friend of mine," he said. "Her name is Maria. She runs a group. They help women and their kids find quiet places. No questions asked, no cost, just help." Petra stared at the card as if it were a burning coal. Her hand trembled as she reached for it. Her knuckles were white. She looked from the card to Zeke, her eyes filled with a desperate, terrifying mix of hope and fear. "Why?" she whispered, her voice cracking. "Because I was a firefighter for 30 years, Zeke said, his voice dropping low. "And I'm tired of pulling kids out of the fire. It's better to stop it before it starts." He gave her a small, sad smile. "Your boy is a good boy. He deserves a house with no yelling." She snatched the card, her fingers closing around it tightly, and without another word, she took Stellan's hand and fled. Zeke watched them go, the mother moving with the frantic energy of a decision finally made, the boy trotting to keep up. He had planted a seed. Now he had to wait and see if it would grow. If Bike Diaries has become part of your week, consider joining the channel membership. Just a couple bucks a month keeps these stories coming. Links below, and hit that hype button if you haven't already. Now back to the story. 3 days passed. It was a Saturday. Zeke was at the Iron Covenant Clubhouse, a converted auto body shop on the industrial side of town. He was cleaning the chrome on his Harley Davidson, a 2003 Road King he'd owned for 19 years. The methodical work calmed his nerves. He hadn't seen Petra or Stellan at the center. He didn't know if he'd overstepped, if he'd scared her away for good. His phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. He almost ignored it, but something made him answer. He wiped his greasy hands on a rag. "Zeke," he said. There was a pause, then a shaky, tear-clogged voice. This is Petra, Stellan's mom. You gave me the card." Zeke's posture straightened. "Yes. Are you okay?" I called the number," she said, her voice a torrent of whispered words. "I called Maria. She was so nice. She didn't blame me. She said there's a place, a spot in a shelter. It's small, but it's safe. I can go tonight. But he'll find me. He always finds me. He said he would." Her voice broke in a sob. Zeke listened, his face a grim mask. "Where are you now?" Zeke asked, his voice calm and steady, the old firefighter at a scene tone taking over. "At the park, by the duck pond. Stellan is sleeping. I told him we were going on a trip. I have one bag, just one bag. I don't know what to do. I'm so scared." "Stay right there," Zeke said. "Don't move. I'm coming. And I'm bringing some friends." He hung up and walked into the clubhouse. 5 members of the Covenant were there, playing pool and drinking coffee. There was Bones, the club president, a retired trucker with a law degree he never used. There was Tiny, a man who was the opposite of his name, a master mechanic who could rebuild an engine with his eyes closed. There was Preacher, the club chaplain, and 2 younger members, prospects still earning their patch. Zeke laid it out, simple and direct. Mother and a 3-year-old kid. Abusive boyfriend. She's ready to leave, but she's terrified. She's at the park. Bones didn't hesitate. Tiny, you and Marcus take the van. Preacher, you ride with me. Zeke, lead the way. He looked at the prospects. You two stay here. This is quiet work. There was no talk of violence, no threats. That wasn't how the Covenant handled this. They knew that beating up one man didn't solve the problem. It often made it worse for the woman and child left behind. Their solution was more permanent. They used their network, their resources, their sheer, intimidating presence to create a wall of safety. They found Petra on a bench, huddled over her sleeping son, a single, overstuffed duffel bag at her feet. She looked up as the 4 motorcycles and the large windowless van pulled into the empty lot, and for a second, raw fear flashed in her eyes. Then she saw Zeke get off his bike, and the fear subsided into a wary uncertainty. Zeke walked over, moving slowly. He knelt down so he was at her level. Petra, this is my family, he said, gesturing to the silent, leather-clad men behind him. They're here to help. We're going to get you and Stellan to the shelter. Then, we're going to go back to your apartment and get the rest of your things. All of them. And we're going to make sure your friend understands that you've moved on. How? She whispered. Bones stepped forward. Ma'am, my name is Bones. I'm a lawyer. I'm also very large. We find that a calm, rational conversation about the legal and personal consequences of harassment, delivered by myself and a few large associates, is extremely effective. We will have one of our club-affiliated lawyers file a restraining order for you Monday morning, free of charge. We will escort him from the property, and we will make it very, very clear that this neighborhood is no longer his home. We will not hurt him, but he will understand. Petra looked at the 4 massive bikers, at their serious, determined faces, and she started to cry. Not tears of fear this time, but of overwhelming, gut-wrenching relief. Tiny and Zeke helped her into the van with the sleeping Stellan. Bones and Preacher followed on their bikes, a rolling shield of chrome and steel. They took her to the shelter, a nondescript brick building with a reinforced door and a quiet, capable woman named Maria waiting for them. While Petra and Stellan were getting settled, the 4 bikers went back to the apartment. They were there for 2 hours. When they left, the boyfriend was gone, his belongings in trash bags on the curb. The locks on the door were changed, and every single thing that belonged to Petra and Stellan was packed neatly in the back of the van. They didn't leave so much as a single photograph behind. 2 weeks later, the Iron Covenant helped Petra and Stellan move into a new apartment. It was a small 1-bedroom place in a building on the other side of town, one owned by a cousin of a club member who gave her a break on the rent. It was clean, it was bright, and most importantly, it was quiet. Zeke was there, along with Tiny and Preacher. They didn't just move boxes, they assembled furniture. Tiny put together a new kitchen table. Preacher stocked the fridge with groceries paid for by the club's community fund, and Zeke went into the small bedroom that would be Stellan's. He had brought a gift, a small toddler bed shaped like a red race car, and something else. He sat on the floor in the middle of the empty room and waited for Stellan to come in. The boy was hesitant, clinging to his mother's leg in the doorway. "Come on, Stellan," Zeke said softly. "Come see your new room." Stellan crept in, his eyes wide as he took in the car bed. He walked over and touched it, his small hand tracing the spoiler. Zeke held out his other gift. It was a door. A miniature wooden door, about 6 inches high, painted a cheerful, bright blue. It wasn't attached to a dollhouse or anything else. It was just a door, with tiny brass hinges and a smooth, round knob. "This is for you," Zeke said. Stellan looked at it, then at Zeke, confused. Zeke took the boy's hand and placed the door in it. It was heavy and solid. "You're in charge of this door," Zeke said, his voice a low, gentle rumble. See? You can open it. He guided Stellan's finger to open the tiny door on its hinges. And you can close it. He helped him swing it shut. You can keep it open or keep it closed. You can put it in your pocket. You can hide it under your pillow. It's your door. You decide. Stellan stood there, holding the little blue door. He looked down at it, his brow furrowed. He opened it. He closed it. He looked at the big door to his new room. He looked at Zeke. Then, for the first time since Zeke had met him, a slow, brilliant smile spread across his face. It was like the sun breaking through clouds. It lit up his entire being. He clutched the little door to his chest and walked over to Zeke. He hesitated for a second. Then he leaned forward and wrapped his small arms around Zeke's neck, burying his face in the worn leather of his vest. It was a hug, awkward, clumsy, and the most powerful thing Zeke had ever felt. He wrapped his own large arms around the boy's tiny frame, holding him gently. He felt the boy's small body relax against his. He closed his eyes. 17 years. That's how long he'd been carrying the ghost of that little girl in the fire-damaged apartment. Today, holding Stellan, he felt that ghost finally begin to fade. This time, he had been there before the fire got too high. This time, he had helped put it out. This time, he knew the boy's name. Thank you for watching this story about a little boy named Stellan and a biker named Zeke. The fear Stellan showed is a real trauma response seen in countless children living in abusive homes. Every year, millions of children in the United States witness domestic violence. This exposure is a form of childhood trauma that can lead to lifelong struggles with anxiety, depression, and PTSD. But intervention and support can change that trajectory. People like Zeke and organizations like the fictional Iron Covenant represent the real-life community groups, outreach workers, and neighbors who step in to offer help without judgment. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, please reach out. You can call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233. There are people waiting to help you find a quiet place. If you are worried about a child, contact your local Child Protective Services or a group like the Child Help National Child Abuse Hotline at 1-800-4A-CHILD. Sometimes, a single phone call can be the door to a new, safer life. Subscribe to Bike Diaries for more stories about the quiet heroes on two wheels. Hit that hype button to boost this video and help it reach someone who needs it. And if you want to support what we do, the membership link is below. Share this with everyone who needs to remember that you don't have to be an official to be a first responder for the human heart. 3 months later. It's a bright Tuesday afternoon at the Northwood Community Center. Stellan is there, but he's not in the toddler room anymore. He turned 4 last month. He had a small party in his new apartment. Zeke and 3 other Covenant members came. They brought a small cake with 4 candles. Stellan hadn't known what to do. He'd never had a birthday cake before. Petra had cried, happy tears this time. Now, in the pre-K room, Stellan is building with Legos. He's building a house. It's tall and colorful. It has windows and a roof. And it has a door. A big red one. A new family is touring the center. A little girl, younger than Stellan, is clinging to her father's leg, crying. The main door to the center slams shut with a loud bang as another parent leaves in a hurry. The little girl jumps and starts to wail, her fear escalating into a full-blown tantrum. Stellan looks up from his Lego house. He sees the crying girl. He doesn't flinch at the sound of the slammed door. He watches her for a moment, his head tilted. Then he gets up. He walks over to his cubby and takes something out of his coat pocket. It's the little blue wooden door. He walks over to the crying girl. He doesn't say a word. He just crouches down and holds it out for her to see. He opens the tiny door, then closes it. He offers it to her. The little girl's sobs hitch. She looks at the small blue object in Stellan's hand, her tear-filled eyes curious. She reaches out a shaky finger and touches it. Stellan's not fixing her fear. He's just showing her that doors can be small, that they can be quiet, that you can be the one in charge of them. It's not an ending, it's a beginning, and that's its own kind of freedom.